This, of course, is the section where we look at brand sentiment and how it's been tracked across social media. We're looking at sentiment analytics, and we're going to be, of course, focusing on Brexit, because this has been, instead of business this week, we said it was Brexit this week. Yeah. Brexit this week. And joining us, of course, is JP Kloppers, who's Chief Executive of BrandsEye. JP, it's lovely to have you in a very interesting week once again. Of course, it's got to be about Brexit. So what are we seeing in terms of sentiment analytics?
Well, the fascinating result from this week was that when we put out our numbers yesterday, we called 56.7% leave from the UK, which was totally against what everybody else was saying, and we took a big risk to do that. I think if you
and this is written down somewhere, you're not making this up today.
Well, it was on your show yesterday, or one of the shows we spoke about it.
Because if we just think about who's on, say, Twitter, for example, it's the younger generation. So had they come out in numbers to actually vote, this could have.
I mean, that's. I think everybody assumes that, but it's not what we saw yet. Certainly this week. If you look at the numbers of people, it's about 500,000 people that we tracked on social media just from the UK. And it's a staggering amount when you think of just the sample size of the Twitter poll.
So traditional polling is obsolete?
Well, I don't know if I could say that quite yet. It's quite a...
But they keep getting it wrong.
Yeah, and this time we were one of the lone voices that got it right, which was amazing.
So talk us through the graph that we're seeing now, because this is the Remain versus Leave. So is this the poll of the sample?
This is over the week. So at the beginning there, we see this is Monday to Thursday, and on Thursday we saw the sentiment inverse, or at least the intention to vote inverse. But it was too little, too late. By the time it had got to that point, I think the influential voice of those who were speaking about the Leave campaign throughout the week had its effect, and that's the only thing we can put it down to. But when we put out the stats on the Wednesday, at that stage it was very much in the favor of the Leave camp, and only on the day of voting did we see the Remain guys actually come out and say, express their opinion.
This was unprecedented. And we were saying at the beginning of the show, and Nazi was saying, why did no one see this coming? It's because it's the first time it's ever happened. The context is completely new. So was there something about the way you researched this where you had to take that into account, or is it simply a question of measuring what people are saying?
I think it's, for us, it's social media's coming of age. I think up until now, and we speak about this every week, what does this stuff mean on social media? Is it all fluff, or can we actually use this to get better intelligence into what's really happening on the ground? And certainly in the UK, we saw that. I mean, if we look just down into the lower stats, and we'll go there in a sec, I think in one of the other slides, if you can switch to the ones where we look at per city, we saw actually as we delved down into individual cities, that even on those, I think 4 out of the 20 that we looked at, we got wrong. The rest all matched exactly what we saw in the election results. And that to me was amazing, that it's the man on the street who's just going onto social media and putting out his opinion, not necessarily saying hashtag leave or hashtag remain, just saying what he feels. And if you can measure that's the challenge which we had to kind of go through this week.
What about the gender breakdown? Because I think that might also just reveal rather interesting insights.
Yeah, the gender breakdown was interesting. We saw in the Remain camp, I want to get this right, in the Remain camp it was mostly at least more female than male, and in the Leave camp it was far more significantly male than female. What that means, I'm going to leave that up to other experts to figure out. But it was interesting. If we come back to the age question, because that's actually one of the demographics that we struggle with on social media, because people don't go onto Twitter and say how old they are. And so we've got to infer a lot.
We must also presume that if you take 1,000 older people and 1,000 younger people, many more of the 1,000 younger are going to be tweeting than the older group.
I'm not so sure. The older category is the fastest growing category on Twitter. And that is kind of
what are they doing that David's not doing? Because we've been struggling here.
to get him to grow, I've seen that. but in that age question, I think what we did see on social media is a lot of people kind of raising two things. The one is this issue of the older generation voting on the younger generation's future, and the younger generation being upset with that. But then also some pretty remarkable stats, and that tweet on the right there shows it, that the biggest portion of voters who didn't pitch were the youngest category.
Is this a question of agency? Can we infer from this that young people are not, don't feel a sense of responsibility about determining the future of whether they're part of an economic bloc or not? I don't understand.
I would be interested to see the stats for elections as well. Generally, I think that younger group coming into the voting age, a lot of them don't vote. They vote when they get older. Maybe it's the same.
Yeah, we've seen it in SA. I think there is a general apathy around the world. And for me, and certainly in this Brexit, it was on a knife edge. And the whole week we've been kind of thinking, which way is it going to go? And for me, it's because there's almost a lack of leadership to rally people towards a common cause. It's so divided. And what everybody underestimated was how big a role the outlying regions were going to play. Because all the cities went remain.
Yeah.
And it was the outlying regions that went leave.
I want to go back to the young people because I think this is quite interesting. You've also captured the voice of the youth, which is in essence a capturing of the key sentiment that young people had leading up to Brexit. One would assume that most of them would have said, no, we should stay.
Yeah, I think certainly in the younger category, when the counterintuitive result came out and they voted to exit, we saw quite a lot of conversation. Well, we must put it in perspective as well. It was 2% of the conversation, which we need to bear in mind, of people saying we should allow those between the age of 16 and 18 to vote because we're deciding on their future here and not giving them a voice.
Well, by that argument, you could say that people of age 12 must be allowed to vote because
where do you draw the line?
Decided on.
Where do you draw the line?
So,
exactly.
so voting age started at what was the
18.
median? 18. And I think there's value in that point though, because I do think people who are 16 years of age should have the chance to exercise their agency in something that's important.
I don't. I think it should be raised. The voting age should be raised to 21.
Oh, David.
In fact, they should raise it to 30. When you look at all the idiot under 30s with tweets on things and subjects.
If that was true, then it would have definitely been leave.
I'm just being difficult.
For a second, I was literally gobsmacked. I'm like, I cannot understand what David is saying. But I think one of the things we were discussing just earlier on, JP, was the long-term effects. I mean, we saw the immediate effect in terms of what happened on the markets, what happened to the currency and so on. Were we able to capture what are the big fears or hopes from people who participated that you drew the sample from about what they think this actually means in terms of a long-term future?
No, I think that we'll see play out over the next few weeks. We took a sample of about 10 or 15,000 people out of that 500,000 to actually accurately record which way are they going to vote. I think what we're going to see unfold out of this is actually the people making decisions being far more intentional and serious about listening to what's really driving consumer behavior. Because they got it wrong, and quite badly so.
And David Cameron got it wrong in calling the referendum because he thought he was going to walk it.
Yeah.
I think there's value in talking about Cameron for a second because, you know, when I woke up to Twitter, finally seeing people saying the one speech that David probably never thought he's going to have to deliver, might have written it, but didn't think that he was going to have to give it. And again, I thought Twitter carried it quite strongly. You could literally follow almost point by point in terms of what the Prime Minister was saying. And again, it's been a very interesting vehicle how that's been able to be captured on social media.
Yeah. No, it definitely is. In situations like this, social media comes into a league of its own because the conversation moves so fast and it's so critical to get it right that any kind of mismeasurement means you end up in a different place.
Let's leave it there for the moment and time to get into the trend of the week. Well, what is the trend of the week? I think we have a good idea where we are going here.
Surprisingly, it's Brexit. And we thought it would be good just to, in light of all the heavy conversations and just the uncertainty that's in the world, just maybe look at the lighter side of what's happened on social media with respect to Brexit today. So we've put up a couple of tweets about that, which we can look at. Here, I mean, Donald Trump was just classic.
Yes.
Arriving in Europe and congratulating them on exiting, not realizing that where he was in Scotland that actually voted to remain. Yeah, so that was classic, and he got a lot of flack for that.
Well, if we, no one expected the Brexit vote to succeed, and no one expects Trump to be president. But hey, watch that space.
That's right.
What did David Beckham do? How does he fit into this conversation?
This tweet I quite like because it kind of, from our perspective, encapsulates what's so hard about social media. Here we have somebody who's in the leave category, and he's saying, I decided to vote Remain now because of David Beckham's comments. He's clearly being sarcastic, but any algorithm reading that would kind of misclassify it, and so you end up with skewed data.
Yeah.
Here this one was sad. I think there was still a lot of negativity today, and just people saying, what next, what do we do now? Some light humor about just what they can do with the pounds as the pound devalued. We've certainly seen those jokes about the rand. Yeah, and then this one again, comical about what next, We've got our victory, but we don't have any plan beyond this.
Exactly.
So what do we do now?
Yeah, again, coming on the age thing, I wonder how many of the people who didn't vote are now complaining about what the result was.
Yeah.
I think the what next question is really, really important, because we asked this earlier as well about whether we are seeing the beginning of a domino effect where lots of countries might decide to get out of that economic bloc, and what this means for the future of regional integration in economic blocs in general. What's your general view on this, JP?
Look, we specialize in measuring the sentiment.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping that by kind of bringing these sorts of tools to markets, it's just going to put good data in the hands of people who can make better decisions, and that we actually see some sensible results, almost as a warning out of what's happened in the UK.
Well, thanks to JP Kloppers, and we had a decent amount of time with him this week, which was great on a big theme like this. He's the Chief Executive of BrandsEye.